Pain is something we all fear, and for some, it leads to the most tragic end. In this video, we will share 5 real stories of the most painful deaths of all time, true accounts of people who endured unimaginable suffering, pushing the limits of human pain and endurance in ways that are both heartbreaking and disturbing. It was the evening of November 25, 1988, in Saitama, Japan. 17-year-old Junko Furuta was riding her bicycle home from school, unaware that this ordinary routine would become the last moment of normalcy in her life. Junko was known as kind, hardworking, and full of dreams. She wanted to become a singer, was saving money for a graduation trip, and spent her days focused on school and her future. That night, everything was taken from her. Around 8:30 p.m., Junko was approached by 2 male classmates, Hiroshi Miyano and Shinji Minato. Miyano was already known for his disruptive behavior, while Minato had connections to gangs and criminal violence. Miyano had developed an obsession with Junko after she rejected his romantic advances, an obsession that quickly turned dangerous. Together, they set a trap. Minato knocked Junko off her bicycle and fled, leaving Miyano behind to pretend he was helping her. Instead of taking her home, he led her to an abandoned warehouse. What happened there marked the beginning of a nightmare that would last over a month. After assaulting her, Miyano contacted Minato and boasted about what he had done. Soon, 2 more classmates joined the boys who were also involved in gang activity and shared a history of criminal behavior. Together, they made a horrifying decision. Junko would not be allowed to leave. By the early hours of November 26th, she was taken to Miyano's home. To avoid suspicion, they forced her to call her parents and claim she had run away but was safe. When Miyano's parents were present, Junko was made to act as his girlfriend. Though his parents eventually realized something was terribly wrong, they chose not to contact the police, fearing retaliation from the criminal group their son was tied to. What followed over the next 40 days was a level of cruelty almost impossible to comprehend. Junko was held captive and subjected to relentless abuse day after day. Others were invited to participate, and over time, nearly 100 people were reportedly involved. Her suffering escalated as her physical condition deteriorated. She was denied care, denied mercy, and treated as if her life had no value. Despite her worsening state, her captors continued without hesitation. Junko's injuries became so severe that she could no longer move properly or speak clearly. At one point, she managed to contact the police, but before she could explain what was happening, she was discovered and punished even more harshly. Her pleas were ignored. Any hope she had left was slowly crushed as the days passed. By early January 1989, Junko was barely alive. Her body was shutting down, and her captors, growing impatient and enraged, decided to end it all. On January 4th, she was set on fire, too weak to resist. Junko Furuta died from her injuries shortly after. Her body was hidden inside a drum filled with cement and disposed of in Tokyo, as if her life could be erased that easily. The truth only came out later that month, when Miyano and another accomplice were arrested for an unrelated crime. During questioning, one of them revealed where Junko's body was hidden. Police recovered her remains, and those responsible were finally taken into custody. But what followed shocked the nation. Because they were minors, the perpetrators were not charged with murder, but with bodily injury resulting in death. The sentences were painfully light. One received 20 years while the others served between 5 and 9. Public outrage erupted. Even after their release, several of the perpetrators continued committing crimes, deepening the sense of injustice. Junko Furuta's case forced Japan to confront serious flaws in its juvenile justice system and sparked national debates that led to legal reforms. Still, for many, those changes came far too late. It was September 30th, 1999, in Tokaimura, Japan, a quiet town northeast of Tokyo where nothing ever seemed out of the ordinary. Inside a uranium processing facility, 3 workers began what they believed would be a routine shift. They had no idea that before the day ended, they would trigger one of the most horrifying nuclear accidents in modern history. one that would slowly and painfully destroy the human body from the inside out. The facility, operated by the Japan Nuclear Fuel Conversion Company, was under pressure to meet a shipping deadline. To save time, the workers Hisashi Uchi, Masato Shinohara, and Yutaka Yokokawa made a decision that would haunt the world. Instead of following strict safety procedures, they bypassed them entirely. Using stainless steel buckets, they poured enriched uranium into a tank that was never designed to handle it. The tank's safe limit was 2.4 kilograms. They poured in more than 6 times that amount. At 10:30 a.m., the room was suddenly filled with a blinding blue-white flash. In that instant, an uncontrolled nuclear chain reaction began. Radiation flooded the facility, invisible, silent, and lethal. The men didn't immediately understand what had happened, but their bodies did. Hisashi Uchi, standing closest to the tank, absorbed an unimaginable dose of radiation far beyond what the human body can survive. Within moments, the damage was already irreversible. The effects were immediate and terrifying. Nausea, confusion, and intense pain overtook them. Uchi began vomiting uncontrollably as alarms screamed through the building. The plant was evacuated, and emergency crews rushed in, but the radiation had already done its work. The men were transported to a hospital in Tokyo, where doctors quickly realized they were facing something they had never seen before. For Uchi, the suffering that followed was beyond comprehension. The radiation destroyed his immune system entirely. His body lost the ability to repair itself, his skin deteriorated, his organs began to fail, and his white blood cell count dropped to nearly 0. Even the smallest infection became a deadly threat. Day after day, his condition worsened, yet he was repeatedly resuscitated whenever his heart stopped, kept alive as his body continued to break down. His pain was constant, his suffering relentless. For 83 days, Uchi endured what many consider the most painful, medically documented death in history. On December 21, 1999, his body finally gave out, and he died from multiple organ failure. Masato Shinohara, who had also received a massive dose of radiation, fought for months before succumbing on April 27, 2000. Yutaka Yokokawa, farther from the source, survived, but his life was permanently altered by long-term health complications. The damage didn't stop with them. More than 10,000 residents in the surrounding area were tested for radiation exposure. Hundreds were found to have been exposed above safety limits. Fear spread through the town, businesses suffered, and public trust collapsed. The accident sent shockwaves across Japan. The company faced severe consequences, criminal charges, massive financial penalties, and a permanent shutdown of the facility. Laws were rewritten, safety regulations tightened, and the Tokaimura accident was classified as a major nuclear event. But for many, none of it felt like enough. This disaster wasn't caused by an explosion or a natural catastrophe. It was caused by human shortcuts, ignored warnings, and a belief that nothing would go wrong. It was the morning of March 19, 2015, in Kabul, Afghanistan. 27-year-old Farkhunda Malikzada stepped out of her home with purpose and faith, heading to a Quran recitation class. She was a volunteer teacher, a devoted student of Islamic law, and a woman with clear dreams she hoped to become a judge one day. Before leaving, she reassured her mother, Bibi Hajera, that she would return soon to help prepare for the Afghan New Year celebrations. It was an ordinary goodbye. It would be the last time her mother heard her voice. On her way home, Farkhunda stopped at the Shah do Shamshira shrine. What began as a simple conversation quickly turned tense. She confronted the shrine's caretaker over the sale of amulets, openly criticizing the practice as superstition and contrary to Islamic teachings. The argument grew heated, and in a moment of anger, the caretaker made a devastating choice. He falsely accused her of burning the Quran. The accusation echoed through the courtyard like a spark in dry grass. Voices rose, people gathered. Farkhunda desperately denied the claim, repeating again and again that she was a Muslim, that she respected the Quran, that she would never commit such an act. But truth had no chance against rage. The lie spread faster than she could defend herself, feeding a growing mob driven by outrage and misunderstanding. The crowd turned violent. Farkhunda was dragged outside, beaten with sticks and stones as her cries for help went unanswered. Police arrived, but instead of shielding her, they hesitated, firing warning shots into the air, powerless or unwilling to confront the mob. At one point, officers moved her onto the roof of the mosque, possibly hoping to protect her, but objects rained down from below. She was struck, weakened, and fell back into the crowd. What followed was pure brutality. She was dragged through the streets, beaten again and again. A car drove over her body, dragging her along the road. Still, it didn't end. Her attackers pulled her to the Kabul River, where the assault continued. Finally, her broken body was set on fire. Some members of the crowd fed the flames with their own clothing. When her body resisted burning, they continued until nothing remained but horror. All of it was filmed, shared, watched. The world reacted in shock. The footage revealed a terrifying truth. This was not the act of extremists hiding in the shadows, but of ordinary people swept up by a false accusation and collective rage. Afghan President Ashraf Ghani condemned the killing, and investigations confirmed what Farkhunda had been screaming all along. There was no evidence against her. She was innocent. As the truth emerged, grief turned into fury. Thousands took to the streets, chanting her name. Women painted their faces red, symbolizing her blood. Her funeral became a historic moment. Women carried her coffin themselves, defying tradition in a powerful act of protest and remembrance. Justice, however, fell short. Although dozens were initially charged and several received harsh sentences, appeals reduced punishments and many were released. For Farkhunda's family and for activists, it felt like a second betrayal. The street where she was killed was later renamed in her honor. Her grave became a place of mourning, reflection, and resistance. For her mother, the pain never faded. She remembered identifying her daughter's burned and battered body, a memory no parent should ever endure. Yet, even in her grief, she stood strong, walking alongside other women who refused to let Farkhunda be forgotten. Farkhunda Malikzade's death exposed the deadly consequences of misinformation, misogyny, and mob violence, but her name also became a symbol of courage, of injustice, and of the urgent need for change. Her story reminds us how quickly a lie can kill, and how dangerous silence can be when humanity is on the line.
RCMP say they got word of an injured man at the summer carnival around 10:40 Tuesday night. Paramedics and firefighters rushed in, but he was pronounced at the scene.
It was August 16, 2003, at the Island County Fair on Whidbey Island, Washington. The afternoon felt perfect, warm summer air, laughter everywhere, the smell of popcorn and cotton candy drifting between colorful booths. Families crowded the midway. Children tugged at their parents' hands, eager for rides. Among the fair's biggest attractions was the Superloop 2, a small roller coaster with a single vertical loop that had thrilled riders for years. Behind the scenes, 40-year-old Doug McKay was working as he always did. Doug wasn't just an operator, he was a co-owner of Paradise Amusements, a family-run carnival business he had grown up in. From selling popcorn as a child to maintaining rides as an adult, the carnival was his life. He was known as experienced, confident, and deeply committed to keeping everything running smoothly for the families who came to enjoy the fair. That afternoon, Doug noticed the Superloop 2 needed lubrication on part of its track. It was routine maintenance, something he had done countless times before. Confident in his skills and pressed by the steady flow of riders, he made a fateful decision. As Doug climbed onto the platform to apply the lubricant, something went wrong. In a split second, he lost his footing. Witnesses later recalled the horror that followed when his long hair became entangled in one of the moving carts. The ride didn't slow. It didn't stop. The cart yanked Doug violently into the air, dragging him along the track as screams erupted below. Fairgoers watched in disbelief as he was lifted as high as 40 feet, his body colliding with parts of the ride before being thrown clear. The moment ended with a sickening impact as Doug was hurled into a metal fence. The joy and noise of the fair vanished, replaced by panic, shock, and screams. Children were still on the ride when it happened. Some saw everything unfold just feet away. Others were splattered with blood, left frozen and terrified. Parents rushed forward, pulling their children close, trying to shield them from what they had just witnessed. One father, whose 12-year-old son had been riding the Superloop too, rushed him home before police could question him, desperate to wash away both the blood and the trauma. Emergency responders arrived quickly, but there was nothing they could do. Doug McKay had already died. Authorities later speculated that his hair or arm had been caught in the moving cart, but the exact details hardly mattered. The result was the same. A seasoned professional, a man who had spent his entire life around carnival rides, was gone in seconds. Shockingly, the fairgrounds resumed operations less than an hour later. The Superloop 2 was shut down permanently, but the rest of the carnival reopened the following day. Doug's wife, Sherry, honored a promise she had once made to him to keep the business running no matter what. The rides continued, but the loss of Doug hung heavy over the fairgrounds and everyone who knew him. Doug left behind his wife and 3 children, Travis, Michelle, and Kelsey. He was remembered as tough but kind, a mentor who cared deeply about his crew and his family. His funeral, held 10 days later in Idaho, brought together loved ones to mourn a man whose life had been built around bringing joy to others. Doug McKay's death is a chilling reminder of how unforgiving high-risk environments can be, even for the most experienced professionals. One moment of routine, one split-second decision, and a life devoted to family and hard work was gone forever. On March 24, 1944, in the small town of Alkaloo, South Carolina, 14-year-old George Stinney Jr. was playing outside with his younger sister, Amy. It was an ordinary day until 2 young white girls, 11-year-old Betty June Binneker and 7-year-old Mary Emma Thames, approached them, searching for wildflowers and asking for help. George and Amy didn't know where to look, and the girls eventually moved on. But that evening, when Betty and Mary failed to return home, the town erupted in panic, and a community-wide search began. George and his family joined in, with George mentioning he had seen the girls earlier that day, a seemingly innocent statement that would seal his fate. The following morning, the girls' bodies were found in a shallow ditch, their lives brutally taken. Almost immediately, George was accused of the crime. Authorities claimed he had confessed to using a blunt object and committing inappropriate acts, yet there was no written confession, no formal record, no witnesses, and no physical evidence linking him to the murders. George was small and frail, standing just 5'1" and weighing only 95 pounds. He was interrogated alone for hours, with no parent or lawyer present. Whether his alleged confession was voluntary or forced remains unknown, but it set the stage for one of the most troubling miscarriages of justice in American history. Less than a month later, on April 24, 1944, his trial began. It lasted only 3 hours. His court-appointed attorney, a tax lawyer with no criminal experience, offered no defense, called no witnesses, and failed to investigate George's alibi. On June 16, 1944, less than 2 months after his conviction, George Stinney Jr. was executed in the electric chair. At 14, he became the youngest person in modern U.S. history to face such a fate. The chair, built for adults, was far too large for his tiny frame. Officers propped a Bible under him to elevate him. The securing straps hung loosely, and the face mask was oversized. Witnesses later described the horrifying scene. The mask slipped, revealing the terrified face of a child in his final moments. His family was devastated, forced to flee town due to threats and racial hostility, leaving George alone and defenseless in his last hours. For decades, his case remained largely forgotten, yet his family and civil rights advocates never gave up fighting for justice. Renewed efforts began in 2004, arguing that George had been denied a fair trial and that his constitutional rights had been violated. Finally, in December 2014, a South Carolina Circuit Court judge vacated his conviction, acknowledging the complete failure of the justice system, the coerced confession, the lack of legal representation, and the absence of investigation, all cited as reasons. For George's family, it was a bittersweet victory. Relief that his name was cleared, but sorrow that no justice could undo the suffering he endured. George Stinney Jr.'s story is a haunting reminder of the deep racial injustices of the segregated South. Though his name has been cleared, The tragedy of his short, wrongfully taken life continues to resonate, serving as a call to protect those who cannot defend themselves and to demand fairness and justice for all.